What's up, horror fans? ANCHORPETE here, and I'm with my co-host, Mr. Danny, Dr. Zayas God. We have a very special guest tonight with us. We have BRIAN ASMAN, who is just this big horror writer star right now, who has probably one of the most talked about books I've seen on social media right now. And I got it right here. He signed it for me. Man, Fuck This House, which is just like the best title you could think of for a fucking book. So, BRIAN, welcome to the Lastercast. We are so happy to have you, man.
Hey, guys. Thanks very much for having me on. I'm thrilled to be here.
You just got back home from SpookyCon, right?
Yeah. First I was at the Ghoulish Book Festival in San Antonio, and then I was at SpookyCon in Denver. So it's been a busy couple weeks, but a lot of fun.
What was SpookyCon like? Because I've never been, and it just looked like it was like the best time for like horror writers, you know?
Oh, it was great. It's kind of like a family reunion, basically. You just walk around and, there's so many people that you see, like, a lot of people that I just know from Twitter that I meet in real life for the first time. But there's, I've been at this long enough now. There's like a core group of people that I run into quite a bit at different conventions. Like you said, a number of the same people were at Ghoulish and then at SpookyCon. So it's just cool seeing everyone. I have a bunch of friends I went to grad school with that were all at SpookyCon too. So that was really cool. So I got to hang out with all my old college friends. So, yeah.
Awesome, man. On your website and in your description of your book, it says that Max Booth is your hype man, right? Like,
yes.
Where did you meet him?
Oh, so Max and I go way back, years ago. But I first met him through just Dark Moon Digest, submitting there and just reading the magazine. And he did Lost Films, the anthology. I got a story in that. So we kind of became friends through that editing process. And then KillerCon 2018, I went out to Austin for that. Got to meet him in person for the first time, and we really hit it off. So I was doing a reading for my Lost Film story at KillerCon, and I think the night before we were like at the bar drinking, and Max was like, "Hey, do you want me to be your hype man during the reading?" And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds like fun." So we're doing this reading, so I'm reading my story, and Max is like just yelling stuff in the background the whole time. Like he's like stalking back and forth on the stage behind me, like, "Yeah, that's right. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Stuff like that. And then he kind of like gets really unhinged. And if you know Max, that's not hard to imagine.
Right.
But he starts like dumping, he dumped like a glass of water all over himself. He threw a chair across the room. He stormed out of the room at one point, slammed doors. It got really crazy. It was a lot of fun. The best part is there was a wait going on upstairs from where we were doing the readings. So I felt kind of bad for all these people, especially because we had a big coffin full of donuts at the entrance. And so they were going up to this wake and had to walk by this coffin full of donuts. So yeah, they had a pretty memorable experience, I would think.
That in and of itself sounds like a great story. Like,
yeah.
And so, BRIAN, you've also written like horror movies too, right?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, there's a feature called A Haunting in Ravenwood, which is on Amazon right now. You can go stream it. It's kind of a neo-Gothic ghost story in the tradition of like old Vincent Price movies, and updated a little bit for 2021, 2022, basically. That was a cool project. I had worked with the guys who made that before on a film called Mutant Vampires from the Planet Neptune, and that's coming out later this year. It's kind of like a sci-fi slasher type deal. So I worked with them, and then they had this new project, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to get on board with this?" I was like, "Sure." So I came on board, did a few passes on the script, and was also a producer on it. And it's really cool. It's a group of people out of Portland called 7th Street Studios. And they are just masters at making low budget films. Just what they can do for essentially no money is really pretty amazing. So really proud of how the film came out. So be sure to check that one out. And I've also made a few short films as well. This past weekend, the film Doppelbanger that I made with John Skip was at Crypticon in Seattle. I also have a short film that I wrote and directed called Real Trouble that's going to be at Gen Con and hopefully a few other places. Waiting to hear back from a number of festivals on that. And then actually at StokerCon, Dangerous Slater and I were hanging out, and we were on this brewery crawl, and we started like just chatting around about doing another short film. We came up with the concept and kind of like beat out the concept with like all the people that we were on the brewery crawl with. And then I had about an hour between when we got done with that and when the Stoker Awards were. So I just went back to my room and wrote like a 5-page script based on everything that we had talked about on the crawl. And then we sent back and forth. So we've had a couple meetings about that already. So that's going to hopefully shoot this summer.
Holy shit.
So very excited about that.
I gotta say, you are fantastic at naming stuff. Because like when Pete told me the name of your book, I was like, that's fucking brilliant. And,
thank you.
And then you said Doppelbanger. That's the
Doppelbanger. Yeah, that was John Skip who came up with that. I was a producer on that and also acted in the movie, but Skip wrote and directed it. So it's a karaoke horror movie. That's a lot of fun. He does a lot of music now, and so he wrote all these songs that sound like different genres of rock songs, specifically for the movie. So it came out really cool.
Wait, you're accomplished horror author. You're into screenwriting. You've directed. Where's your like horror inspirations come from? You're probably close to the ages of Pete and I.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming we kind of grew up in around the same time period. Where do you get your inspirations from when you're writing for like novels and stories, and then from like a screenwriting point of view?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I think we're probably all about the same age. So I grew up in like the late 80s, early 90s. And the first horror film I ever saw was Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Nice. I think I was about 5 years old. It terrified me. It was the scariest damn thing I had ever seen in my life at that point, being 5 years old. And so that's definitely a real influence for me. Like I love creature design like that, just kind of ooey gooey horror, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so for films, that's definitely a big influence. And then as I got older, I got into a lot of the other stuff that was around in that era, The Fly and things like that. So like a lot of like the sci-fi horror stuff like really resonates with me. And then, books wise, when I first started getting into reading horror, it was mostly like Stephen King and stuff like that. Well, of course, like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark when I was a kid. That was the big thing. And then Goosebumps, R.L. Stine. And then as an adult, when I got into reading horror, I think it was really like Joe Hill's 20th Century Ghosts that made me go, oh, you know what? I really want to write horror, because I majored in English and I was writing what I thought were literary short stories and submitting them places, and nothing was going anywhere. And I think I realized I wasn't writing what I wanted to write. I was trying to write to a market that I actually, in retrospect, don't really need to break into. Nothing against pure literary fiction, but it's just not really the stuff I like writing. The stuff that I like, I always had trouble figuring out where to submit things, because I'd write something that was like just a little too off kilter for the markets I was looking at. And when I really discovered horror, I was like, this is perfect, because this is like a big enough tent that pretty much everything I write can kind of go under here, even though, I call myself a horror writer, but I really write just kind of like BRIAN ASMAN fiction, basically. If that doesn't sound too pretentious. But, I'm really inspired by people like Joe Lansdale, who have carved out a career doing Joe Lansdale books. Yes. So that's the kind of writer I want to be when I grow up. I want to be able to move seamlessly between different genres and have people just pick up like, okay, this is Brian's voice. No matter if I'm writing crime or if I'm writing like haunted house books like Man, Fuck This House, or zany martial arts comedy like Nunchuck City. That's kind of my influences and my goals.
That is awesome, man. Like, yeah, I'm a huge Joe Lansdale fan. I interviewed him for this channel too. And that's a great kind of role model, or like someone to kind of follow in the footsteps of. That actually kind of it answers some of the questions I had for you. Because specifically about this book, I was going to say that the fact that Killer Clowns from Outer Space was like your first real dive into horror kind of makes sense, because this book, it's so interesting, because it's very, very funny. Right.
Thank you.
But then it's scary too. I was telling Danny, because Danny hasn't read it yet, but like, it's very much like Poltergeist, but like you could like remove the supernatural element from it and just focus on this family. And I think just the family itself is entertaining by themselves, especially just the siblings too.
Thank you.
Damien in particular, you know. And so I was going to ask you though, like when you come up with a story like this, right? Like, what's the impetus? Like, did you come up with the family, like the characters first, and then kind of put them in the scenario? Did you think, oh, wouldn't it be cool if the house did this? Like, what got this story started?
Oh, that's a great question. So there are a couple of things that kind of went into this book. So the first thing I should tell you is that the book started as a Twitter joke, as a lot of my projects do. But one day the title just popped into my head. I just got on Twitter. I was like, you know what would be a great name for a haunted house book? Man, fuck this house. Because I think I'd been watching like a lot of haunted house stuff. I had rewatched Poltergeist for the first time in years, which really holds up. It's I love that movie because it's PG horror that's actually really scary, and it's just a really masterful film. So I had watched that. I was watching haunted house stuff and just thinking about the haunted house tropes that we see over and over again, right? And the general question, like, oh, why don't they just leave? Why does this happen? Why does that happen? Why do people react this way? And I really wanted to dig into a lot of those tropes. I think originally when I started writing the book, it was going to be like a really broad skewering of a lot of different horror tropes. There was like, I had ideas of doing more stuff with the town itself and kind of doing like a Children of the Corn thing and all these other things. But I eventually kind of just honed in to really get into the house and the family. So from a horror standpoint, that's what influenced my desire to write the book. But the biggest influence behind the book was there was a coffee table book back in the early 2000s called Post Secret. And it was like a distillation of stuff from a website of the same name. And the idea was that people would just write into this website with like a 1-sentence secret. So it could be anything, but it was totally anonymous. And the idea was just share your deepest, darkest secrets with us. And so I'm flipping through the book, and one of the secrets was, I love one of my children. That really, really stuck with me. And so when I start, and it's funny too, I guess the other thing I should mention, and I've told the story a couple times before, but when I first had the idea to write the book, it was originally going to be kind of like a fratty ghost comedy. It was going to be like Van Wilder, but with ghosts, basically, is what I was going to try to write. And it was going to be even more of like just a ridiculous, like absurd comedy. And as I'm kind of in the early stages of working on the book, my friend Autumn Christian had this thing on Twitter where she said, like this tweet, and I'll say something out of pocket about you. And so I like the tweet. I'm like, yeah, I love Autumn, and I want to hear whatever her unadulterated like take on me is, And she said something along the lines of, I feel like you write exclusively for bros, and it makes me feel left out. And that's one of those things that really like made me think and go like, okay, like, am I pigeonholing myself too much? Right. Because I don't want to be stuck into any one thing. And I don't want to, when people get one of my, when a new book comes out, I want to surprise people. I want people to know that like when I write a book, it's going to have some certain, like, it's going to have like a certain, like, approach to it, maybe certain worldview, certain things you can expect, but I don't want people to go, okay, I'm getting cookie cutter bullshit from Brian, basically.
Right.
So her comment really pushed me to go, okay, how can I make this book different? Right. So I threw out my original concept altogether and was like, one thing I really haven't done is write about families. Yeah. So that's how that started. Right. And I go, okay, like this is a haunted house book. We're talking about haunted house tropes. I'm going to have like the typical American family. Right. And the way I write, generally, I'm a pantser. I don't really plot things out. What I do is I'm really character first. So and when I first start writing, I had like these kind of like, the characters are kind of like smudges, right? And as I write more, their details become more and more fine and more realized, essentially. And so I started with this family and this particular dynamic of, inspired by the Post Secret thing, where one of the parents loves one of their children, but not both of their children, essentially. Right. And what would happen to a family like that put into an extraordinary situation?
Yeah.
So that was essentially the impetus for the book. And then things kind of just spiraled from there, basically.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because you said that you were starting out with a frat comedy kind of book, and then it's this more, inspired by your friend's tweet. And like, you can absolutely see that because the most relatable character in the book is Sabrina. You obviously care about her well-being the most, you're in her head the most. Yeah, I like, Danny, you definitely have to read this book because it's not just like kind of cliche horror movie kind of scares or anything like that. It's real creative, interesting things that happen to this woman in particular and her family. So I like, you mentioned, Brian, that it's like your voice that you're writing in. And one of the things that kind of stood out to this book for me was that there's a lot of like references to things that are like relevant, like right now, like Fortnite, and just like the references are very contemporary. And is that kind of a thing that's part of your voice, that's in all of your works?
Yeah, there's definitely a heavy pop culture element in a lot of the stuff I do.
Yeah.
Some of the new stuff I'm working on, maybe not, but I love pop culture. I'm a fan of so many different things, like a lot of my tattoos are like cartoons I liked as a kid and all kinds of like movies I love and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that, the pop culture thing, like the kind of Kevin Smith approach where you have characters riffing on pop culture. That's something that's always appealed to me. And pop culture is such a big part of our lives. We all consume it constantly, basically. So for me, it seems strange when, like, for characters that don't have any kind of seeming connection to what's going on in society, like that seems kind of weird in a way. So that's why, like, Sabrina is kind of commenting on certain Instagram feeds and stuff like that. It's like for each character, what are the things that they would be exposed to, or what things would resonate with them? So with like the character of Damien, for example, when he's like into Fortnite and stuff, that came more from a place of like, okay, what are some things that kids are into that I also know about?
Right. Yeah.
I think also like that just makes a book feel more real. I haven't read your book yet, but like if you're creating all of these like fictional brands for like stuff that actually exists, it doesn't appeal. Whereas if you can just say Fortnite, everybody knows Fortnite, and it comes across as you're a real person writing about real people. In your fictionalized horror ghost story, it feels more real. I feel when I read a book and I hear Fortnite versus some make-believe stuff.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. And like, one of the reasons why I wanted to do that too, like you just pointed out, was like to make it feel more real, because it was important for me for Damien to feel like a child, even though he has this like kind of like Stewie Griffin, like super genius thing going on. One thing that people have like kind of said to me several times is that he actually reads like a child, though. He has, even with his like supposed super genius stuff, it's like a childish approach to things, right? And he has a kid's view of the world where it's like, and as you guys know, in a lot of horror, the way that kids are written is often as little adults. So, I love The Shining, but Danny is essentially like a 42-year-old man. Like, when you read his POV chapters, like
with Man Fuck This House, you also have like a giveaway, right? Like a contest essentially, right? Where like at every level of sales that you reach, there's another prize that someone could essentially win. And I think you just reached that level where someone could get an Amazon gift card, right?
Yes. Yeah, that was the latest one. So the ultimate goal is to win a haunted house, asterisk, allegedly haunted house. But if I sell 1 million copies of the book in my lifetime, I'm going to find a house that the owners say is haunted, purchase it, and then give it away. And so to get there, there's a bunch of different step goals. So like you said, the one that actually just this weekend was at the 10,000 unit mark, giving away a $100 Amazon gift card. And I actually need to go into the post and randomly select a winner right after this, because I got kind of busy this week and haven't done that yet. But yeah, so it's just the contest came about because I was actually watching, you guys know Ghost Adventures, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a Ghost Adventures movie that they made, and I was watching that one day while I was homesick, and the Zach Baggins like buys like this house in Indiana that the owners say is like super haunted, and he like just buys it sight unseen for like $200,000 because it's Indiana. Sorry, no offense to Indiana, it's a reasonable place to buy property these days. And, and so the film is him like going and investigating this house, but that just made me go, oh wait. Like I could actually, if I sell enough copies, like I could actually just do that. I could do a haunted house giveaway. And so that's one of the things that I think has resonated with people is, look at this lunatic doing this. And, it's like, it's all over my website. It's like, no, this is actually real. I am committed to this. Like, is it probably going to happen? Who knows? Right. It's a long shot, but you take, you miss the swings you don't take. So.
Yeah.
And as of this weekend, we're 1% of the way there, which is not insignificant for an indie book, frankly.
Yeah.
Right. That's a good point.
I went to college in upstate New York, and in upstate New York, you can find some nice, cheap haunted houses. Let me tell you.
Yeah. There's actually like a whole market for like haunted stuff, like I live in California, and there's always like ghost towns available where you can like buy a whole freaking ghost town for like $250,000, which again, that's a lot of money. But when you're talking about property, like it's affordable for a lot of people. So
your other movie though, with Haunting in Ravenwood, right? You said that you wanted to do this kind of like Vincent Price type story, and it definitely feels that way. I watched it on Amazon.
Oh, cool. Nice.
Yeah. It has that kind of like that retro vibe, that kind of classic horror story, but obviously it's like in the contemporary world where people have cell phones and but I was gonna say though that you wrote that with Calvin Maury McCarthy, right? He's the director.
Yeah.
Did he have the initial idea and then you like worked with him, or how'd that work out?
Yeah, he's also the director of the mutant vampire movie I mentioned. So he wrote the first couple drafts of this script, and then brought it to me and had me asked if I wanted to come on board as a producer, and I ended up doing a couple passes on the script to kind of work some stuff out, see if we could take it to the next level. It was a good script. It was a good script to begin with, and I got to put my stamp on it, so I was really fortunate to do that. So yeah.
Something you said earlier, it stuck with me. The idea that like you had an idea and you were like, oh, let me just head back to my hotel room and just jot down 5 pages, because like I feel like Pete and I always talk about how like we want to, like, Pete's in a writing group, and I used to write when I was much younger, and then life happens and shit.
Yeah.
And like my biggest problem was I'd have like an idea and I'd just never be able to put it down. And like you've done short stories, you've done, novellas, you've done screenplays. Like, how do you like figure out what medium your work is going to end up going into?
Oh, that's a great question. So it's kind of like, I don't know, when I think of ideas I already know what medium I want to do. And it often depends on just what opportunities I have available to me. So if right now, when I like for short stories, for example, I'm honestly mainly doing short stories if I get invited to something. Just because when you're doing short stories, it's a great way to get your name out there when you're first starting out as a writer. So I highly recommend it. But short stories are a lot of work. I would say it can be as much work as like a novella to do, really, and they can be hard to place. So you spend a lot of time working on like a 5,000 word short story, and then you spend year, 2 years, 3 years trying to find a home for it. And that's all part of the process. So I'm not complaining. That's what writing short stories is. But given that I work in different mediums, I just have to figure out where to best allocate my time, essentially. And, I'm just like, as much as I'd love to get into some of the top markets, with all the other stuff I have going on, and honestly, my burning desire just to get stuff out into the world, it's kind of made more sense for me to do more novellas and things that I have more control over. And then stuff like short films, for example, like if I have an idea for short, I look for things I can just go make myself that I don't have to depend on. I don't have to depend on the fickle winds of fate to help me accomplish, basically. So I've written a few features, but not a ton for that reason as well. Like I definitely want to write more features, but like the Ravenwood thing was just kind of a serendipitous thing I was able to get involved with. And I mean, the reason why is essentially because I'm always putting myself out there, basically. So if for anyone who's aspiring to be a writer, one of the most important things you can do other than sit down write is to just get out there and meet people, essentially. Like I go to conventions, I get involved in other people's projects through things like Indiegogo and Kickstarter. And I try to support other people when I can. Who knows how good of a job I'm doing, but I try. And I think, when you make those connections with people over time, every time you get your name out there, it's, it gets out there, right? And when people hear your name enough times, they sometimes think of you for things, and so it's just about plugging away and just kind of, doing your thing and, showing up every day, basically.
Yeah. And what's cool too is that like the horror writing community is just so like welcoming, right?
Yeah.
Because like every table that I went to at the Ghoulish Book Festival, everyone was just really nice. No one was like, "Oh, I don't have time for you" or anything like that. They're just like welcoming. It's real. I mean, you especially too. And so I was gonna say, Danny mentioned my writers group. Everyone in the group had read "Man, Fuck This House," and everyone had great things to say about it too. So
yes,
yeah. But just kind of as we kind of like wrap everything up, like I was gonna say, so you're putting yourself out there. Like, what do you have coming up right now? Then, like, what's the next thing for you?
Awesome. Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. So I'm working on a couple projects right now that I can't really talk about yet, but I can say that they represent a level up for me, which is really exciting. I do have a short film with Danger Slater I'm doing this summer called Peanut Butter Bully. That's going to be kind of, it's ridiculous. It's almost like a Roadrunner cartoon, but in real life. Essentially, that's going to be a hell of a lot of fun to do together. So working on that, I have a couple stories for anthologies that I'm doing right now. One is called American Cannibal. It's coming out, I think, next year in the spring, but they just announced the TOC today. And it's a great TOC. It's got like Elizabeth Massey and Al Going Back and a number of big names in it. That one's really cool. There's another one that I'm doing called Trapped with Candice Nola. That's coming out, I believe, in December. That's got another great TOC. I'm kind of blanking on exactly who's involved with that. I know Steve Strett is doing the forward for that. And then it's a great group of people. We have like a Discord where we've been chatting about it. Or a Facebook Messenger group or something. They're hilarious. So I got those couple things coming out. I have a book coming out at the end of the year that I'm not quite ready to announce yet. But when it does, that's going to be in July when I'm going to officially announce that. And when I do, it'll make sense for why I'm announcing in July. But that's going to be even more of a horror comedy than Man, Fuck This House. This is more of like a absurd slapstick thing, kind of like Nunchuck City, that similar tone. So I'm excited about that. And then I have another novella that I'm working on that's going to be coming out next year. That I guess I can talk about that one because I announced it on Twitter like 6 months ago. But that was another one where I just kind of like, come up with an idea and then throw it out on Twitter. And then I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to go write this now. But that one is going to be quite different than anything I've done. As of right now, I'm planning to release it in February on Valentine's Day. But it's going to be it's like a bleak occult romance.
Okay.
And it's kind of I went through a pretty bad breakup last year. Wow. And so it's kind of inspired by that. It's a way to just channel all my feelings into something I haven't written before. Yeah. And so that's kind of one of my goals too right now is just what else can I get out there that's vastly different than stuff I've done before, and just continue to like kind of show different sides of me to people.
Yeah. You seem like such a prolific guy, and like one last question. I was gonna say, like, how quickly do you write stuff, right? Because that peanut butter thing that you're talking about, right? Like, that's inspired from StokerCon, right? Wasn't there some kind of like peanut butter incident there?
Oh, so Danger Slater, there's a potato incident where people were leaving potatoes all around the hotel for various, like it was like an art thing, I don't know. It started because Danger Slater, was just joking on Twitter. He was he was like, all I'm bringing is like a backpack full of peanut butter sandwiches. Which he actually like did, and I think he was subsisted on mostly peanut butter sandwiches for the entire weekend, but also kind of being like the Johnny Appleseed of peanut butter sandwiches and like giving them to people and things like that. And so that was kind of the genesis for the film idea, essentially. So yeah, I wrote the first draft of that in like an hour, and then Danger and I went back and forth for a couple days, like working on drafts and kind of like refining things and everything like that. But yeah, I can write pretty fast, but the downside of that is sometimes I throw out things completely. So I'm also kind of now at the point where I'm at with looking back on what I've done already and where I want to go. I want the next things I do. I want things to surprise people. I want things to people. I want to stretch people's opinion of what I can do or what my books can be. Yeah. And so sometimes, like I was writing a book earlier this year that was a slasher novel, and I get about halfway through, and I'm like, you know what? Like this is an okay book. You know, people. I could release this. People would like it. People would read it. They'd enjoy it. Will people remember it? So I just said, you know what? This one's got to go for right now, at least. And if I find the approach that'll really like elevate it to the next level, I will. But I don't want to just do something that's just kind of like okay, here are all the standard beats, and it's a well executed thing that we've seen before a bunch of times. Yeah. That's like with Man Fuck This House, like, whatever else people want to say about it, it's a story that people haven't seen before for the most part. And that's what I want to recapture with every new project is, can I do something that's different? The book at the end of the year, which I'll be talking about, that's just really more of a comedy thing, but it goes in some weird directions, and it's kind of like it's a little like Carlton Mellicky. So should be cool, but yeah.
Well, we look forward to reading that too, and if you ever want to come back on the show, we'd be glad to have you back on too.
Oh yeah, love chatting with you guys. So yeah, I'm down to come on again for sure. So once I get some more stuff in the chamber ready to announce, I'll come back on.
Dude, awesome.
Sounds
okay,
great.
Well, thank you so much, and it's been a real pleasure. And I guess we will be talking to you real soon, then, man.
For sure, guys. It was great talking to you. Have a good one.